Hey everyone, welcome back to MSTR Daily. My name is Matt, and in this video, we're going to look at some bearish calls put out by financial journalists, and then we're going to look at some market indicators to see how close we are to a top in Bitcoin based solely on retail interest. But before we get into it, check out MSTR Pro, where I disclose my personal stock and options portfolio for Microstrategy. Every week, we review different option strategies, and in last week's video, we discussed how to select the right strike price and date target for options and how to position to not lose money. To start today, we need to look at the flurry of bearish Microstrategy articles that have hit the financial media over the last week. To start, we have an article on You Today with a title that reads, "Prominent Tesla short seller issues major MicroStrategy warning." Okay, what's the warning, fam? That we're going to the moon? No, apparently it's hedge fund manager Mark Spiegel, who is best known as a major Tesla short seller. Yeah, I'm not sure that's something to be proud of. Most short sellers got their faces ripped off with Tesla. But he said that Saylor is like the Hunt brothers in the silver market. One day he's going to want to unload all of the Bitcoin and realize that he is the market. Well, thanks. This legendary short seller is really saving us with this breaking news. Here's my response. No, that's simply not how MicroStrategy operates, and it's nothing like the Hunt brothers cornering the silver market. First, Bitcoin was healthy and thriving before Saylor ever pressed the buy button. Secondly, they have been very clear that they are never selling their Bitcoin.
That is the case, but is there a price at which you would consider selling some of the Bitcoin, pulling out? So, I mean, because you can do something with New York City. You can live in New York City. You can have a business in New York City. What do you do with the Bitcoin besides it just gather value? Well, because they want to sell it eventually, Michael. I mean, let's be honest. Most of the people who are, yes, sure, some people pass it on to their children, but most of the people who are buying assets at some point want to sell the assets at a profit. So let me say it a different way. Okay. People that use fiat currency as a store of value, there's a name for them. We call them poor.
And this isn't a situation where they're like, oh, we'll hold for 10 years and then take our profits. No, when you understand Bitcoin, you realize that they are never selling. They will borrow fiat or issue shares if they need to raise cash. In fact, if we reach hyper-Bitcoinization, most Bitcoin will rarely move. I've heard investors theorize that on a Bitcoin standard, 99% of Bitcoin will be slow-moving capital and will be held in deep cold storage for generations, and 1% will be used as petty transactional cash on higher layer protocols. Saylor is not, quote, cornering the market with a 1% stake, and he might get to 2% and maybe even 3% with this new $42 billion capital program. Believe it or not, if Saylor were to exit his position, the market would have plenty of liquidity to absorb it, and that liquidity is only growing over time. And also, couldn't this argument be used for the Bitcoin ETFs? Couldn't it be used for nations like El Salvador and Bhutan? What this genius doesn't understand is there is no peak for Bitcoin. It literally will continue its trend higher in purchasing power in perpetuity, assuming there is increasing human ingenuity and entrepreneurship. Okay, for our next bear case, we have an article put out by Yahoo Finance, but they basically just republished a bear case that was posted on WallStreetBets. The irony there is kind of hilarious. Anyways, let's just read straight from Stunning Wishbone's post titled MSTR, a Ponzi Scheme. This should be good. I'm going to read through it straight and then respond to it, but as I'm reading this, leave me a comment below as to how you would reply to it. MSTR is probably the biggest overvalued stock in the US at the moment, and I would expect the stock to drop by 50% in the coming month. Here's why. MSTR is trading at almost 250% premium of its Bitcoin holding value, meaning that when you buy MSTR, it's equivalent to buying Bitcoin at 3.5x its value, or 245k per Bitcoin. MSTR has a 17.8 Bitcoin yield as it's issuing new shares at a 250% premium to buy Bitcoin at a discount, while Bitcoin yield is much lower. This strategy would be attractive only if it was sustainable in the long run, but as soon as MSTR drops, this yield will decrease or even go negative if MSTR trades at a discount. MSTR announced this week that it will raise $42 billion to buy Bitcoin in the next 3 months, $21 billion via equity issuance and $21 billion via debt. The retail won't be able to absorb such amount, which will push MSTR significantly lower, as we have seen in similar case like AMC and other. Retail will be ruined once again. The additional debt will also leverage MSTR massively. Oh my gosh, that sentence. Which will become an issue when the stock Bitcoin drops, as it might force MSTR to do emergency equity raise at a discount, putting even more pressure on MSTR. Well, first, they're not even starting this program until I believe 2025. They're not going to be dumping $21 billion worth of shares onto the market and trying to issue 5x the amount of convertible bonds they have outstanding in the next 3 months. That's not going to happen. They're going to do 10 billion in 2025. They're going to do 14 billion in 2026, and then they're going to do 18 billion in 2027. And when it comes to the multiple, it's not like nobody knows this. Everyone knows that MSTR is trading at a premium. Earlier this morning, MSTR was trading at a 3.34 multiple to their net asset value. And I guess technically he is right. If MSTR does trade at a discount to their Bitcoin holdings, then yes, issuing stock would be dilutive for shareholders. But the thing is that their stock is not directly tethered to Bitcoin because they aren't a Bitcoin ETF. They are a vehicle for Bitcoin's volatility. Ben Workman has been saying this for some time. The investors who buy the convertible bonds are not buying them for exposure to Bitcoin, although according to Saylor, these instruments have outperformed Bitcoin, which is kind of an interesting fact. Instead, these investors are buying them to harvest the volatility of Bitcoin. That's why convertible bond purchasers also delta hedge their exposure to the movement in the underlying stock. This gives them return based on vol, not based on Bitcoin price appreciation. There are also countless investors that buy MSTR without a care in the world for the multiple. ETFs, funds, momentum traders, option traders, and many more. The multiple that MSTR trades at will rise and fall over time due to many factors. And saying that it should drop 50% in the coming month is sort of idiotic, and I think Stunning Wishbone 767 was one of the shorts that got blown up this morning. Okay, for our last bear case, we have Seeking Alpha flip-flopping on their take for Bitcoin, and I think their writers are just trying to get clicks because MSTR is the best performing stock year to date. The first one says Supermicro's accounting concerns could be bad for the stock, just ask MicroStrategy. Where did that come from? MSTR is just catching this random stray, and unfortunately I have so little respect for Seeking Alpha that I won't even create a free account to read the rest of the article. And 2 days later, on Monday, November 4th, another writer posted an article titled Long Bitcoin, Short MSTR Isn't As Smart As You Think, which we've been highlighting on Twitter for like a year now. And I guess the moral of the story is that you need to do your own research, and if you rely on me or Seeking Alpha or WallStreetBets or some random guy on Twitter, you won't build the conviction needed to be patient in the corrections that will come and hold for the long run, which is where the real money is made when investing in good businesses. For our next story, let's contrast these financial media sites with a true investment bank with a reputation and money on the line. Barclays just had an analyst that increased their price target from $225 to $275 per share. They still maintain an overweight rating on the stock, and in my personal opinion, it won't be long before they're raising that target to $325, then $375, and then $1,000 per share. Okay, for our third and final story today, we have the classic tale of the Bitcoin bull market and the retail investor. Bitwise put together this great chart that shows the linear price of Bitcoin overlaid on the Google search index for Bitcoin. Back in March, it reached an 80, but after the choppy sideways summer, the search term has dropped to below 30, showing that retail hasn't even arrived yet. Now, this can definitely turn on a dime if we break to new all-time highs or get to 100K, but the point is that if this cycle is anything like prior cycles, which is honestly debatable, we are still in for some massive price increases as the cycle progresses to the most explosive 12 months, which are the 12 months post-presidential election. And speaking of the election, I have seen so many people talking about trading MSTR around this election or just trading it in general. But I want to caution you, if you sell too early, you may never get the chance to get back in at the same or lower cost basis. And if you buy too high to get in on a strong momentum move, then you may be underwater for months. The moral of the story is that if you trade this stock, you will get your face ripped off. Although I talk about option strategy in MSTR Pro, I do not talk about trading to make money. I talk about how to buy options to accumulate more shares, and sometimes it can be appropriate to hedge if things get overheated. But even the metrics that measure that aren't perfect indicators. So here's a clip of Saylor where he talks about trading in and out of stocks that will increase many times over.
Like if you roll the clock back to 2007, Steve Jobs invents the iPhone. And, people thought, oh, it's a toy. By 2009, the iPhone's got an app store. And if you understood anything about software, the iOS is a new operating system, and it's going to be its own ecosystem, at least as important as the web. And it's going to spawn an entire new generation of applications, right? And the mobile wave is responsible for what, like $5 trillion, $5 to $10 trillion of wealth over the next decade. Can you imagine someone sitting around saying, oh, I get mobile device technology, and you're trying to time the market in Apple stock in 2011? Like you're buying and selling Apple stock in 2011? You want to shake them like, are you out of your mind? I'm trading Facebook stock back and forth between $8 a share and $4 a share and $12 a share. And you just want to do this. Like, do you not understand that one day every single person on the planet is going to have one of these things in their pocket, and it's going to go up by a factor of 100, and you're trying to trade Apple stock between $1.25 and $1.17 and bragging about how you bought it at $1.25 and sold it at $2.11? And have you figured out the consequences of being short the share if it goes up by $100? Like the amount, are you out of your mind? Because, by the way, I spent 30 years in the business and I obsess over this every single freaking minute of the day. And I wrote a book on it, right? I wrote the book. I predicted the future. I made $500 million investing in these things, right? And I started, and I put a small amount of capital in. And let me tell you one thing, John, I can't time the market. I have no freaking clue.
Let me know in the comments below what you think of that clip and how you view your MSTR investment. Do you view it as a trade or a long-term hold? And if you haven't had the chance to check out my last video where I went over the top 10 biggest moments from the Q3 earnings call, a few of which that went under the radar, check that out in the top right corner of the screen. And with that, if you enjoyed the video, consider hitting the like button and check out MSTR Pro in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.